Mike Saltmarsh stared at the ancient circuit breaker box, its rusted metal face mocking his attempts to modernize his grandfather's house. The basement's musty air clung to his nostrils as he clicked his flashlight on and off, testing the power. "Come on, you prehistoric piece of junk," he muttered, jimmying the master switch. Nothing. The darkness remained absolute except for his flashlight beam, which caught dust motes swirling in the stale air. His grandfather's house had always been weird, but this was getting ridiculous. In the 3 weeks since he'd inherited the place, he'd discovered no fewer than 7 hidden compartments filled with what looked like ancient artifacts, 3 journals written in languages he couldn't identify, and now this, an electrical system that seemed designed by a drunk Victorian engineer. The beam of his flashlight caught something odd on the wall behind the breaker box. Mike leaned closer, running his fingers along what appeared to be a seam in the concrete. It wasn't straight like a normal construction joint. It curved in an almost perfect circle. "What the hell were you up to down here, Gramps?" Professor James Saltmarsh had been many things. Archaeologist, collector, and according to local gossip, a bit of a crackpot. But he'd also been the only family Mike had left, and this house was his final gift to his grandson. Mike grabbed his hammer from his tool belt and tapped the wall lightly. The sound that came back was hollow. "Okay then." He squared his shoulders and swung harder. The concrete crumbled surprisingly easily, revealing a dark space beyond. As debris clattered to the floor, the beam of his flashlight caught something that definitely shouldn't have been there. A metallic surface that gleamed with an otherworldly sheen. Holy shit. He cleared more of the wall away, working faster now, driven by a curiosity that overrode his usual caution. The object behind the wall was massive, at least 8 feet tall and shaped like an elongated egg. Its surface was covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them. "This is not happening," Mike said to himself, but he couldn't tear his eyes away. The pod, there was no other word for it, hummed faintly, a sound just on the edge of hearing that made his teeth itch. He reached out to touch the surface. It was warm, like living metal, and the moment his fingers made contact, the symbols began to glow with a soft blue light. "Oh, crap." Mike jerked his hand back, but it was too late. A seam appeared in the pod's surface, accompanied by a hiss of escaping air. The seam widened into an opening, and something moved in the darkness within. Mike stumbled backward, tripping over his toolbox and landing hard on his ass. From the pod emerged a figure that his brain refused to process at first. A woman, but unlike any woman he'd ever seen. Her skin was a deep emerald green that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Her hair floated around her head like liquid silver, and her eyes glowed with an inner light that matched the color of her skin. She blinked those impossible eyes and focused on him. Her lips curved into a smile that made his heart skip several beats. "My savior," she said in perfect English, though her voice carried an accent he couldn't place, something musical and alien. She dropped to one knee before him, bowing her head. "I, Elena, pledge myself to your service, as is proper for one who breaks the seal of slumber." Mike's mouth opened and closed several times before he managed to form words. What?" She looked up at him, confusion crossing her ethereal features. "Have I spoken the pledge incorrectly? My translation matrix may need calibration after such a long dormancy." "No, the English is fine, it's just—" Mike scrambled to his feet, keeping his back to the basement wall. "Who are you? What are you? Why were you in my grandfather's basement?" Elena rose gracefully, and Mike noticed she was wearing some kind of form-fitting suit that seemed to be made of the same living metal as the pod. "I am Elena of the Stellar Concordat, though I suspect that name means nothing to you. As for why I was here—" She glanced around the basement, taking in the cobwebs and dated equipment. "How long has it been since the one you call grandfather sealed me away?" "He died 3 weeks ago," Mike said, his mind racing. "But this house, he's owned it for decades. You're telling me you knew my grandfather?" "Not directly." Elena moved closer, studying him with those luminous eyes. "The one who helped me hide was much older than you, but I see the familial resemblance. You have his jawline." She reached out as if to touch his face, and Mike jerked back. "Whoa, okay, let's just slow down here." He held up his hands. You're saying my archaeology professor grandfather helped hide an alien in his basement? And now you think you belong to me or something? Is that not the custom on your world? Elena tilted her head, silver hair flowing like mercury. When one saves another from certain death or imprisonment, do they not form a bond of service? No, definitely not. We abolished slavery like 150 years ago. Mike ran a hand through his hair, trying to process the situation. Look, I appreciate that you're grateful or whatever, but you don't owe me anything. I was just trying to fix the electricity. Elena's eyes widened and a smile played across her lips. Ah, I see. You wish to establish that our relationship will be based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Very progressive of you, my savior. That's not what Mike stopped, realizing he was getting nowhere. Okay, new approach. Why were you in that pod in the first place? Elena's expression grew serious. I was being hunted. Your grandfather, or rather his predecessor, offered me sanctuary when I fled from the Galactic Council's enforcers. The stasis pod was meant to hide my energy signature until the danger passed. She glanced at the pod, now dark and silent. Though I had not intended to sleep quite so long, a loud knock from upstairs made them both jump. Mike, a female voice called. You in there? Shit, that's Sarah from next door. Mike grabbed Elena's arm and immediately let go when he felt an electric tingle pass between them. You need to hide. Is this Sarah a threat? Elena's hands began to glow faintly. What? No, she's just nosy, but I can't exactly explain why there's a green woman in my basement. He looked frantically around the cluttered space. Get back in the pod. The stasis chamber requires 6 hours to reactivate, Elena said calmly. Perhaps I could simply explain that I am a visiting scholar studying your grandfather's artifacts? With green skin? Is that unusual for your species? Yes, Mike hissed as footsteps creaked on the stairs. Very unusual. Mike? Sarah's voice was closer now. Your truck's outside and the door was open. Elena's form suddenly shimmered, and before Mike's eyes her skin shifted to a more human tone. Her hair darkened to a more natural silver blonde, and her eyes lost their glow, though they retained their unusual emerald color. A simple camouflage adaptation, she explained at his shocked expression, though I can only maintain it for short periods. Sarah appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her blonde ponytail swinging. She stopped short when she saw them, her eyes widening. Oh, I didn't realize you had company. This is, Mike started. Doctor? Elena Green, the alien said smoothly, extending her hand. I'm assisting Mike with cataloging his grandfather's collection. So fascinating to see such unique artifacts firsthand. Sarah shook her hand, looking between them with poorly concealed interest. I didn't know you were having anyone over, Mike. I just wanted to check if you were coming to the town meeting tonight. They're discussing the Historical Society's proposal about your grandfather's house. Right, the meeting. Mike had completely forgotten. I'll try to make it. You simply must attend, Elena said, laying a hand on his arm. The touch sent another strange tingle through him. The historical significance of this property cannot be overstated. Sarah's eyebrows rose at the gesture. Well, don't let me interrupt your cataloging. Nice to meet you, Dr. Green. She headed back upstairs, but not before giving Mike a significant look that clearly said they'd be talking about this later. Once they heard the front door close, Mike slumped against the wall. This is insane. I can't believe she bought that. Your neighbor seems quite interested in you, Elena observed, her skin shifting back to its natural green hue. Are you and she mated? Mike choked. What? No, we're just neighbors, and we don't use the word mated here. We say dating or married or... Why am I even explaining this? Because you find me intriguing and wish to ensure I understand your customs. Elena smiled that disconcerting smile again. Your elevated heart rate and dilated pupils suggest strong attraction, though you're trying to suppress it. Can you stop doing that? Reading me or whatever? My empathic abilities are passive, my savior. I cannot simply turn them off. She moved closer, and Mike found himself trapped between her and the wall. Just as I cannot ignore the protocols of my culture. You freed me, therefore we are bound. Look, Elena. Mike tried to focus on her words rather than the way her presence seemed to fill all his senses. Earth doesn't work like that. You're free to go wherever you want. Do whatever you want. What I want, she said softly, is to understand why your grandfather chose to hide me here, and why the council was so desperate to capture me in the first place. Her expression grew troubled. My memories of the time before stasis are fragmented. Mike felt a surge of sympathy despite his misgivings. You really don't remember. Parts, fragments. I remember running, being afraid. I remember your grandfather, or someone like him, offering help. But the reasons, she shook her head, silver hair rippling. Perhaps if we explore the house together, it will help restore my memories. I guess that makes sense. Mike pushed away from the wall, trying to regain some composure. But we need to establish some ground rules. First, no calling me savior. My name is Mike. Second, no serving or pledging or whatever. And third, he gestured at her distinctive appearance. We need to figure out a better disguise if you're going to be hanging around. As you wish, Mike. The way she said his name sent an unexpected shiver down his spine. Though I should warn you that maintaining a humanoid appearance for extended periods will require significant energy. I will need to consume substantial nutrients. You mean food? I can handle that? He headed for the stairs, then turned back. Just try to act normal if anyone else shows up. And maybe we should come up with a better cover story than being a visiting scholar. Perhaps I could be your mate instead, Eilina suggested innocently. That would explain my presence in your home and our obvious mutual attraction. Mike nearly missed the next step. Let's just stick with the scholar story for now. As they climbed the stairs, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just become exponentially more complicated. Behind them, the pod continued to hum softly in the darkness, its cymbals pulsing with a faint, rhythmic glow, like a beacon broadcasting to the stars. In the kitchen, Eilina examined everything with boundless curiosity, while Mike tried to process the situation. She picked up a coffee mug, turning it over in her hands as if it were a priceless artifact. Your world's technology is charmingly primitive, she observed, though I sense there's more to this dwelling than appears on the surface. Your grandfather's energy signature lingers in the walls. His what now? Mike opened the refrigerator, then realized he had no idea what an alien would eat. And what did you mean about the council wanting to capture you? Are we in danger? Eilina set down the mug and faced him, her expression serious. The stasis pod's shielding should have masked my awakening, but we cannot be certain. It would be wise to examine your grandfather's research as soon as possible. He must have left some record of why he chose to help me. Right, because that's exactly what I needed today. A cosmic mystery on top of everything else. Mike closed the refrigerator and leaned against it. I still can't believe this is happening. This morning I was just a guy trying to fix up his weird inherited house, and now I'm harboring an alien fugitive who thinks she belongs to me. You find the situation distressing? Eilina moved closer, and Mike felt that strange electric awareness again. Your physiological responses suggest otherwise. Elevated heart rate, increased perspiration, pupil dilation. Could you stop analyzing me? It's creepy. I apologize if I've made you uncomfortable. She didn't step back, though. In my culture, such transparency is valued. We believe that understanding each other's true reactions leads to deeper connections. Yeah, well, in my culture, we believe in personal space and not reading people's body functions without permission. But even as he said it, Mike couldn't help noticing how the kitchen light played across her ethereal features, or the way her presence seemed to charge the air around them. A car door slammed outside and they both tensed. Eilina's skin shifted back to its human disguise just as another knock sounded at the front door. Popular dwelling, she murmured. It's probably just more neighbors being nosy. Mike straightened up. Remember, you're Dr. Green. You're studying artifacts, and you're definitely not an alien fugitive from space who was hibernating in my basement. And I'm not bound to you by the sacred laws of my people? Her lips curved in what he was beginning to recognize as amusement. Especially that part. But as he headed for the door, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that his grandfather had left him more than just a house. He had left him a mystery, one that was currently standing in his kitchen, examining a toaster with the fascination of an archaeologist discovering a lost civilization. And somewhere out there in the vast darkness between the stars, something was stirring, something that had been waiting a very long time for Elena to wake up. Mike opened the front door to find Tom Henderson, the town's building inspector, standing on his porch with a clipboard. The man's perpetually suspicious expression deepened when he saw Mike. "Mr. Saltmarsh," Tom said, peering past him into the house, "got some concerns about the work permits for your renovations." "I filed everything last week," Mike said, trying to block the inspector's view of the interior. He could hear Elena moving around in the kitchen and prayed she wouldn't decide to investigate. "Yes, well, given the historical nature of the property and your grandfather's unique modifications, we'll need to do a thorough inspection." Tom tried to step forward, but Mike didn't budge. "Now's not really a good time. I have a consulting archaeologist here helping me catalog artifacts." As if on cue, Elena appeared beside him. "Hello," she said, perfectly poised in her human disguise. "I'm Dr. Green. I assume you're here about the historical preservation requirements?" Tom blinked, clearly thrown off his game. Yes, among other things. There have been complaints about strange lights and noises coming from the property at night." Mike tensed, wondering if the pod's activation had been visible from outside. "Old houses make noise," he said quickly, "and I've been working late, hence the lights." "Indeed," Elena added smoothly. "The structural settling patterns of this era of architecture are quite fascinating. Perhaps you'd like to see my preliminary report on the building's historical significance." "That won't be necessary," Tom muttered, already backing down the porch steps. "Just keep the noise down and make sure you file any additional permit requests." He gave them both one last suspicious look before retreating to his car. Mike closed the door and let out a breath. "That was close. How did you know what to say about historical preservation?" "I accessed your local municipal database through my neural interface while we were talking." At his shocked expression, she added, "Your world's digital security is minimal. You can hack into government websites with your brain?" "Among other things." She wandered into the living room, examining the cluttered bookshelves. "Your grandfather's collection is extensive. Many of these artifacts aren't from Earth." Mike followed her, watching as she traced her fingers along the spines of his grandfather's journals. "What do you mean, not from Earth? They look like normal archaeological stuff to me." "This normal archaeological stuff includes a Centaurian memory crystal, 3 Pleiadian star maps, and what appears to be a deactivated quantum beacon." She picked up what Mike had always thought was just a weird paperweight. "Your grandfather wasn't just studying Earth's past. He was documenting extraterrestrial contact." Mike sank into his grandfather's old armchair, head spinning. So when the townspeople called him crazy, he was actually quite sane, simply more aware than most. Elena set down the paperweight and turned to face him. "This house was chosen as my sanctuary for a reason, Mike. Your grandfather, or whoever helped hide me, knew exactly what they were doing." A thought struck him. The town meeting tonight. Sarah said they're discussing the Historical Society's proposal about the house. What if they want to turn it into a museum or something? "That would be problematic," Elena agreed. "There are likely other artifacts here that should not be discovered by your general population. And," she hesitated, "the pod's energy signature will be harder to mask now that it's been activated." Meaning that if the council has maintained surveillance of this sector, they may have detected my awakening." She began pacing, her camouflage flickering slightly with agitation. "We should attend this meeting. I need to understand what plans they have for this property." "We?" Mike stood up. "You can't go to a town meeting? Half the people there have known me since I was a kid. They'll know you're not really a visiting scholar." "Then we'll need a more convincing cover story." She stopped pacing and gave him that disconcerting smile again. "Your neighbor Sarah already suspects there's more between us than professional collaboration?" "Number, absolutely not. We are not pretending to be involved." "Why not?" "It's a logical solution. It explains my presence here, allows me to accompany you to public functions, And she stepped closer, and Mike felt that now familiar electric awareness. Your physiological responses suggest you wouldn't find the pretense unpleasant. Would you stop doing that? But he didn't step back this time. Look, even if we did, people would ask questions. Where you're from, how we met, your background. I've already created a suitable digital identity. Dr. Eilena Green, visiting scholar from the University of Edinburgh, specializing in comparative archaeology and ancient civilizations. All the necessary credentials and documentation are now in your world systems. Mike stared at her. You did all that while we were talking to Tom? Multitasking is a basic skill for my species. She tilted her head, studying him. Does this make you uncomfortable? The ease with which I can manipulate your technology? Everything about this situation makes me uncomfortable, Mike admitted, but I guess we don't have much choice. The meeting's in 2 hours, and we need to figure out what the Historical Society is planning. Excellent. Elena's form shimmered as she adjusted her human appearance, her outfit transforming into something more professional, a sleek green dress that matched her disguised eyes. Shall we practice our courtship behaviors before the meeting? I've analyzed your popular media for reference, but I'd prefer direct instruction. Mike choked on air. That won't be necessary. Just act natural, and maybe don't mention analyzing anything. Very well, but her amused expression suggested she was still reading every physiological response he was trying to hide. Perhaps we should review your grandfather's journals before the meeting. There might be information about why this location was chosen for my sanctuary. Grateful for the change of subject, Mike retrieved the journals from the shelf. They spent the next hour poring over his grandfather's cramped handwriting, most of which seemed to be in code or unknown languages. This symbol keeps appearing. Mike pointed to a recurring mark that looked like a spiral with 3 dots. Any idea what it means? Eilena's expression grew troubled. It's the mark of the stellar concordat, my people. But these notes, they're warning about something. A threat greater than the Council's enforcers. She traced the symbol with one finger. If only I could remember why I was running. What was so important that I needed to be hidden for decades? Before Mike could respond, a deep thrumming sound filled the house. The lights flickered, and every electronic device in the room went dead. That's not good, is it? Mike asked, already knowing the answer. No, Eilena said, her camouflage dropping as she focused on something he couldn't perceive. That's a quantum pulse sweep. Someone is scanning for my energy signature. Her eyes met his, now glowing with an intense emerald light. The Council knows I'm awake. What do we do? First, we attend your town meeting. We cannot allow them to take control of this property. There are too many secrets hidden here. She gathered up the journals quickly. Then we need to find out exactly what your grandfather knew, and why he. She stopped, head tilting as if listening to something. We're not alone. A shadow passed across the living room window, too large to be human, moving too smoothly to be natural. Mike felt the hair on the back of his neck rise as a low, mechanical whir filled the air. The basement, Eilena whispered. The pod's shielding might mask us temporarily. They moved quietly toward the basement door, but before they could reach it, there was a sound like crystal shattering, and the front window exploded inward in a shower of glass. A figure stood in the broken window frame, tall and angular, its form shifting like mercury in the fading daylight. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding metal. Fugitive Eilena, it said, you have been located. Surrender for processing. Mike looked at Eilena, saw the fear and determination in her alien eyes, and made a decision. He grabbed her hand, feeling that electric connection surge between them. Run, he said. And so began the strangest night of Mike Saltmarsh's life, running from an alien enforcer with a beautiful fugitive who claimed to belong to him, all while trying to make it to a town meeting about his grandfather's house. Somewhere in the cosmic joke his life had become, Mike was pretty sure his grandfather was laughing. They burst through the back door just as something metallic slammed into the kitchen wall behind them. Mike's heart hammered in his chest as he pulled Eilena toward his truck. Keys! He patted his pockets frantically. No time! Eilena pressed her hand against the door lock. There was a brief spark, and the truck's engine roared to life. Get in! Mike jumped into the driver's seat as the enforcer emerged from his house, its mercury-like form rippling in the twilight. Elena slid across the hood in a move that would have looked ridiculous if it wasn't so graceful, landing in the passenger seat as Mike threw the truck into reverse. "Your vehicle's primitive combustion engine won't outrun a council enforcer," she said, watching the rearview mirror as the metallic figure began to pursue them. "Yeah? Watch me." Mike spun the wheel, tires screeching as they fishtailed onto the narrow road leading into town. "I grew up racing these back roads. Better than any quantum whatever." "Quantum displacement drive," Elena corrected, then grabbed the dashboard as they took a sharp turn at speed. "Though I admit your manual control skills are impressive." "Glad you approve." Mike caught a glimpse of silver movement in his mirrors. "But unless you've got some alien tech that can help, we're still in trouble." Elena's hands moved in complex patterns, manipulating invisible controls. "I can create a temporal distortion field, but it will only buy us minutes. We need somewhere to hide." "The old mill," Mike said, taking another turn that sent them bouncing down a dirt road. "It's been abandoned for years. Lots of metal machinery that might confuse whatever scanning thing it's using to track us." "Clever." Elena smiled, and despite their situation, Mike felt that now familiar jolt of attraction. "The Enforcer's quantum sensors will have difficulty distinguishing my energy signature among multiple ferrous masses." "Right. That's totally what I was thinking." He glanced at her. "Your camouflage is slipping, by the way." Elena's skin had started showing patches of its natural green. "Maintaining the disguise requires energy I need for defense." She pressed her hand against the truck's dashboard again, and the engine's pitch changed. "I've optimized your propulsion system, but it won't last long." The truck surged forward with newfound power, and Mike had to fight to keep it on the rough road. Behind them, the Enforcer had become a silver streak, moving with impossible speed. "So, want to tell me what you did to piss these guys off?" Mike asked, trying to keep his voice steady as he navigated the treacherous path. "I wish I knew." Frustration colored Elena's voice. "My memories before stasis are fragmented. I remember running, remember feeling that what the council was doing was wrong, but the specifics..." She shook her head. "It's like trying to catch stardust with your hands." "That's poetic for someone who talks about quantum displacement drives." "My people believe science and poetry are the same thing viewed from different angles." She touched his arm, sending that electric tingle through him again. "Much like how you claim not to want my devotion, yet your body responds to my presence." Mike nearly drove off the road. "Can we maybe focus on the killer robot chasing us? Multitasking, remember?" But her teasing smile faded as she looked back. "The temporal field is failing. We need to reach this mill of yours quickly." The old building loomed ahead, its broken windows dark against the sunset sky. Mike killed the headlights and coasted the last 100 yards, trying to make their approach as quiet as possible. "Nice truck," Elena said as they rolled to a stop. "For primitive technology." "It was my grandfather's too." Mike cut the engine. "He left me a lot of weird stuff, apparently." They slipped into the mill through a side door, moving carefully in the dim light. The vast space was filled with rusted machinery, old looms and spinning wheels that had once been the town's economic heart. Elena moved like a ghost through the shadows, her natural bioluminescence providing just enough light to see by. She touched various pieces of equipment, seeming to analyze them. "This will work," she whispered. "The metal content is high enough to mask my signature, at least temporarily." She turned to Mike. "But we cannot hide forever. The Enforcer will methodically search every possible location. Then we need a plan." Mike peered through a grimy window. "The town meeting starts in 30 minutes. Whatever the Historical Society is planning for the house, we need to stop it. We can't let them start poking around in there." "Agreed, but attending a public gathering while being hunted by a council enforcer seems crazy." "Yeah, welcome to my life since this morning." He gave her a sideways look. "Speaking of crazy, why do you keep flirting with me if you're supposed to be my servant or whatever?" Elena's luminescence brightened slightly. Was she blushing? "My people believe that the strongest bonds are formed through multiple types of connection. Service, friendship, attraction, they are all threads in the same tapestry." That's still poetic. Would you prefer I calculate the exact hormonal and neurological responses you experience when I do this? She stepped closer, her natural glow illuminating his face. Mike's heart rate doubled, and he knew she could sense it. I thought we were hiding? The Enforcer's sensors are currently confused by the machinery. We have a few moments. Her hand touched his chest, right over his thundering heart. Your species is so interesting, trying to separate everything into distinct categories. Servant or equal, friend or lover, duty or desire. Why not embrace the complexity? Before Mike could respond, a metallic screech cut through the air. They both froze as heavy footsteps echoed outside. Multiple Ferris signatures detected, the Enforcer's grinding voice announced. Initiating detailed scan. Eilena's expression became serious. We need to move. Now. Where? That thing's between us and the exit. She smiled, and there was something wild and beautiful in it. Who said anything about using the exit? Her hand found his again. Do you trust me? I've known you for less than a day. And yet you're already running from authorities and hiding in abandoned buildings with me. I'd say we're forming a strong bond. Mike looked at their joined hands, felt that strange energy flowing between them. You're going to do something crazy, aren't you? Quantum displacement isn't crazy. It's just very, very uncomfortable the first time. Her grip tightened. Hold your breath. The world dissolved into light and sensation, and Mike had a moment to think that his grandfather had left him way more than just a weird house. He'd left him an adventure. And maybe if they survived the night, something even more interesting. Quantum displacement, as it turned out, felt like being turned inside out while riding a roller coaster through a thunderstorm. When the world reformed around them, Mike doubled over, fighting the urge to vomit. The nausea will pass, Eilena said, steadying him. Most species require several jumps to acclimate. Thanks for the warning, Mike gasped. When his vision cleared, he realized they were standing behind the town hall. How did you know where to go? I accessed the building's blueprints from municipal records earlier. She was already shifting back into her human disguise, though the effort made her movements less fluid. The meeting has already started. Through the windows, they could see the town council chamber filling with people. Sarah was there, along with Tom Henderson and what looked like half the town's population. We can't just walk in there, Mike whispered. That enforcer thing will find us. It will be searching the mill for some time, and in a crowd, my energy signature will be partially masked by the biological readings of other humans. She straightened his collar with an oddly intimate gesture. Besides, we need to maintain normalcy. Nothing draws attention like absence in a small community. How do you know so much about small towns? I analyzed 6 months of local social media posts while you were driving. She linked her arm through his. Shall we, my dear? Mike felt his face heat at the casual endearment. Just try to act normal. Define normal for a relationship between a human and a disguised alien fugitive. You know what I mean. They slipped in through the side door, finding seats near the back just as Mayor Wilson called the meeting to order. Sarah caught Mike's eye and gave him a knowing look when she saw Eilena beside him. Now, regarding the proposal for the Salt Marsh property, the mayor was saying, the Historical Society believes the house contains artifacts of significant cultural value. More than they know, Eilena murmured. Dr. Reynolds from the State University has offered to conduct a full survey, Wilson continued. Given Professor Saltmarsh's unique collection methods, there are questions about the provenance of some items. Mike felt Eilena tense beside him. They can't do that, he whispered. It's private property. But it's zoned as a historical site, Tom Henderson spoke up, and there have been concerns about unauthorized modifications, strange equipment in the basement, unusual power usage patterns. If I may, Eilena stood, her presence somehow commanding instant attention. I'm Dr. Green from Edinburgh University. I've been working with Mr. Saltmarsh to catalog his grandfather's collection, and I can assure you that everything is being properly documented. The mayor blinked. We weren't aware of any official involvement. My appointment was rather sudden, Eilena smiled diplomatically. But given the international interest in Professor Saltmarsh's work, It would be premature to allow state authorities to disturb the site before our preliminary findings are complete. Mike watched in amazement as she smoothly took control of the conversation, dropping just enough academic jargon to sound authoritative while being vague enough about details to avoid suspicion. It was like watching a master performer. Then the lights flickered. Eilena's hand found his knee under the table, squeezing in warning. The enforcer was close. "Perhaps we should schedule a proper presentation," she said quickly, "once we've had time to prepare the necessary documentation." "That seems reasonable," the mayor agreed, "though there is the matter of the building code violations." A low humming filled the air, and Mike saw Eilena's camouflage flicker slightly. They needed to get out of there. "I can provide those reports tomorrow," Mike stood. "But right now, Dr. Green and I have a conference call with her colleagues in Edinburgh. Time zones, you know?" They were almost to the door when Sarah intercepted them. "You're not getting away that easily," she said. "What's really going on with you two?" The humming grew louder. Through the windows, Mike caught a glimpse of something silver moving in the darkness. "It's complicated," he said. "I bet it is," Sarah smirked. "The way you look at each other. This isn't just about artifacts, is it?" Eilena, perhaps sensing an opportunity, pressed closer to Mike. "Is it that obvious?" "Honey, the whole town's going to be talking about this tomorrow." "Let them talk," Eilena said, and before Mike could react, she kissed him. It was like touching a live wire. Energy coursed through him, making his head spin and his heart race. Her lips were soft, but carried that same alien warmth as her skin. And for a moment he forgot about everything else. Then the power went out. Chaos erupted in the darkness as people fumbled for their phones. In the confusion, Eilena pulled Mike toward the exit. "Was that kiss necessary?" he whispered as they slipped outside. It provided an excellent cover story and thoroughly confused the enforcer's bioscanners. She sounded entirely too pleased with herself. "Though your response suggested you found it more than just tactical. Can we focus on not dying? Multitasking, remember?" But her tone grew serious. "The enforcer is adapting to my quantum signature. We need to return to the house. There may be something in your grandfather's research that can help us understand why I'm being hunted." "The house? That's the first place it'll look." "Exactly. Sometimes the best hiding place is the most obvious one." She touched his face, her hand cool against his flushed skin. "Trust me?" "You keep asking that. You keep not answering." The enforcer's metallic form appeared at the end of the street, its liquid silver surface reflecting the moonlight. "Fine," Mike said. "I trust you, but if we die, I'm going to be really annoyed." "Noted." Her smile was visible even in the darkness. "Hold your breath." The world dissolved again, but this time Mike was ready for it. As reality twisted around them, he kept his grip on Eilena's hand, anchoring himself to the one certainty in his suddenly insane life. When they rematerialized in his grandfather's study, he managed to stay on his feet. "You're adapting quickly," Eilena observed. "Most humans require several attempts before they can maintain consciousness during quantum displacement." "Maybe I'm special," Mike said, trying to ignore how she was still holding his hand. "Maybe you are." She released him and moved to the bookshelves. "We need to find anything related to the Stellar Concordate or the Council. Your grandfather must have known what he was protecting when he hid me." "Right, because this day wasn't weird enough already." But Mike started searching through the cluttered desk. "Just no more surprise kissing, okay? At least not until we're not being chased by killer robots." Eilena's laugh was like chimes in the wind. Was that a promise of future possibilities? Before Mike could respond, they heard the front door splinter. The hunt was far from over. "The basement," Eilena whispered urgently. "The pod's shielding might help protect us while we search for answers." Mike grabbed his grandfather's most recent journal, and they raced downstairs just as heavy metallic footsteps echoed above. The pod still hummed in its alcove, symbols pulsing with that eerie blue light. "Can you read any of this?" Mike held up the journal, showing pages filled with complex symbols. Elena's eyes widened. "That's not just council script. It's classified diplomatic code. Your grandfather was more than just an archaeologist." Her fingers traced the symbols. "He was documenting council corruption." A crash from upstairs made them both jump. The enforcer was searching room by room. "Talk fast," Mike said. "What kind of corruption?" "The Council claims to protect less advanced species from dangerous technology, but these records suggest they're actually suppressing development to maintain control." Her voice grew bitter. "My people discovered this and tried to help other worlds advance. That's why they branded us rebels." "And that's why they want you?" "No." Eilena's expression changed as she read more. "According to this, I wasn't just any rebel. I was carrying proof. Genetic data showing the Council has been experimenting on developing species, including humans." The basement door splintered. Mike grabbed Eilena and pulled her behind the pod just as the enforcer descended the stairs, its liquid metal form rippling in the pod's blue light. "Fugitive Eilena," it intoned. "Surrender the data and submit for memory extraction." "Memory extraction?" Mike whispered. "Is that as bad as it sounds?" "Worse." Eilena's hand found his in the darkness. "But now I remember why I chose stasis. The data isn't stored in any device. It's encoded in my genetic structure. They can't recover it without destroying me." The enforcer moved closer, its sensors sweeping the room. "Compliance is mandatory. Resistance will result in termination of both subjects." Mike looked at the woman beside him. Alien yet somehow more real than anyone he'd ever known. In less than a day, she'd turned his world upside down, and he couldn't imagine going back to normal life without her. "Those symbols on the pod," he said suddenly, "they're not just decoration, are they?" Elena caught his meaning immediately. "They're a containment matrix. If activated properly." "Like this?" Mike slammed his hand against the pod's surface, focusing on the symbols he'd seen glowing earlier. The pod's hum rose to a crescendo. The enforcer lunged forward, but Elena was faster. Her hands danced through the air, manipulating quantum energies. The pod's symbols flared brilliantly, and a field of blue energy expanded outward, trapping the enforcer in a crystalline matrix. "That won't hold it for long," Elena warned. "The enforcer's quantum core will eventually break free." "Long enough to do this." Mike held up his grandfather's journal. "The Council's been experimenting on humans? Let's see how they like being exposed." He pulled out his phone and started taking pictures of the journal's pages. "Sarah's not just my nosy neighbor. She runs the town's most popular news blog. One post from her, and this goes viral before the Council can stop it." "Mike!" Elena touched his arm. "If you do this, they'll never stop hunting us. You'll have to leave everything behind." "You mean we'll have to leave everything behind?" He met her glowing eyes. "Unless..." Was that kiss really just to confuse the bioscanners? Her luminescence brightened. "Multitasking, remember." "Though I admit some tasks were more enjoyable than others." The enforcer's prison began to crack. They had moments at most. "Then I guess we better make this quick." Mike sent the photos to Sarah with a message explaining everything. "Ready to start a revolution?" Instead of answering, Elena pulled him close and kissed him again. This time there was no pretense of tactical advantage, just that incredible electric connection and the knowledge that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The containment field shattered. "Hold your breath," Elena whispered against his lips. Reality twisted around them one last time, depositing them beside Mike's truck. As they sped away from the house, his phone buzzed with Sarah's reply. "Oh my God! This is bigger than the time the mayor got caught with those alien artifacts. Story going live in 10 seconds. "So," Mike said as they headed for the highway, "any other secrets I should know about? Hidden superpowers? Ancient prophecies?" Elena laughed, her natural green skin glowing in the dashboard lights. "Nothing that can't wait until after our first proper date. Pretty sure we skipped dating and went straight to fugitives on the run. My people believe labels like dating and fugitives are unnecessarily restrictive." She gave him that now familiar teasing smile. "Though I suppose I can no longer claim to be bound to you by our customs." "Good." Mike reached over and took her hand, feeling that spark between them. "Because I'd rather face whatever's coming as equals." Behind them, lights began appearing in the sky, more council ships responding to the enforcer's signal. But ahead lay open road and endless possibilities. "You know," Elena said thoughtfully, "your grandfather left several properties around the world, places where he stored other artifacts and research. Are you suggesting we turn them into a network of rebel bases? I'm suggesting we make our own customs. Her hand squeezed his. Together. Mike smiled as they drove into the night. His grandfather had left him more than a house full of secrets. He'd left him a chance to make a difference. And maybe, just maybe, find something even more valuable along the way. The council would be hunting them. The road ahead would be dangerous. But as he glanced at the extraordinary woman beside him, Mike knew he wouldn't have it any other way. After all, some things were worth fighting for. Some people were worth leaving everything behind. And some love stories weren't meant to be normal. Dear listeners, we have just completed the first chapter in the extraordinary saga of Mike and Eilina, a story that began with a simple basement renovation and transformed into something far greater. It's a tale where adventure meets romance, where danger dances with hope, and where the earthly and cosmic collide. But what happens next? How did Mike and Eilina use the network of secret sanctuaries left by his grandfather? What other secrets lie hidden in his journals? How did humanity react to the exposure of the Galactic Council? And of course, how did the relationship evolve between an ordinary guy from Earth and an extraordinary woman from the stars? The story is just beginning. Ahead of them lies chases across continents and planets, uncovering the mysteries of Grandfather's legacy, meetings with other rebels against the Council, dangerous missions and incredible discoveries, and of course, the development of their unique romance. Would you like to know the continuation of this story? To discover how Mike and Eilina cope with life on the run, fight council corruption, and build their relationship despite all their differences? Let me know in the comments, and perhaps we'll embark on a new adventure with our heroes. After all, as Eilina said, some love stories aren't meant to be normal. What do you say? Are you ready to find out what awaits Mike and Eilina next? The mysteries of the grandfather's other properties, the full extent of the Council's experiments on humanity, the growing rebellion against galactic corruption, all these threads are waiting to be unraveled, not to mention the evolving dynamics between our unlikely couple as they navigate both their feelings for each other and their dangerous new life together. The universe is vast, the possibilities endless, and the adventure is just beginning. Shall we continue their journey together?